This is Roxy with Roxana Sinex Art, and I'm here for 3 Gear Studios doing a painting demonstration on how to paint eyes. This is part 2. I am going to do a brief recap though, for people who missed part 1. This is the painting that we ended up with at the end of part 1. This is a 4-part series. So what we did is initially we started out with a toned canvas. The canvas was lightly toned with burnt sienna, raw sienna. You can see, let me move the camera around just a little. Oh, it's not going to rotate. It needs to be just a little bit. There, now you can see the whole picture. I think that'll work out. Here you can see there's no paint here. And what it is it's a wash of burnt sienna and just paint thinner or mineral spirits. It's the same thing over a white background, which I'm using a board here instead of canvas because I like the smooth texture, especially if you end up making prints and make enlargements. It also, you can put just a frame on the back to hold it out from the wall and paint the edges. And on something this thin, because this is only like a 1/4 inch or 3/8 of an inch. And so you could just paint them black or something like that. And then you can make a little mounting to put on the wall. And I'm thinking of doing a whole series of these. So I might want to put them all on the wall without frames, just with, I could put them in all different patterns and designs then, depending on, whatever I wanted to do, the space I had to fill or whatever. So what I started out with is, this is an example. It's another painting I'm working on. And you can see it's a cat. You can see the head, with the eye and the nose. And so this one's toned darker, but I just sketched it in charcoal pencil first. So that's how I started out last week. That's what we started with. And then the first step was just to establish the strong values. The values are what makes the shape, but I find if I put in the darkest dark and the lightest lights, then it kind of just gives me more of a guide through getting the color on. So this is an example, another cat that I'm working on, but I've just put in the darkest darks here and the lightest lights. And this cat has a lot of light shining down on it, so it's all backlit. And there's a window here and it's glowing around the edges, and he's sitting on this, it's a girl cat. She's sitting on the chair. There's actually another cat hiding under the chair, and it's going to be very dark here, but I haven't put all that dark in because it's not as dark. This actually is a black and white cat. So I want to be sure to get that really dark in there. It also helps me maintain the drawing underneath, because as you put in on paint, you lose the lines. And that's why it's not like a coloring book, trust me, because you're doing all of the half tones and all the color, all the multiple values of the darks and the lights as you go. And you lose the lines. But one of the big purposes of the lines is, one, if you put a lot of effort into the composition, it maintains that composition. And the other thing is it gives you confidence to start out on the painting. It's rather overwhelming to just be staring at this blank canvas. And maybe you even have a picture of what you want, but it's like, where do I start? How big is the head? Where is it located? I want it to be, in the same composition. So it's very, very helpful. The other thing you can do is use a grid, and maybe next session, I'll show you how to use a grid, because especially if you're going from something very small as far as your source material to something very large, then, you don't want to make, it's just really easy to just draw it using the grid, because you can have a matching grid on your source material. And so you can say, let's see, it's like over 3 squares and up half a diagonal line. And so you can kind of make a mark there, and you end up almost with a dot to dot kind of. But it helps you maintain your picture, because I know I put a lot of work into putting together the composition and, figuring the light and all of that. And it just helps me a lot to be able to transfer all that thinking that I already did onto the canvas. So I wanted to just show you for ones that you didn't see before. I'm doing a couple other eye paintings, and I finished one and I almost finished the other. It's basically done, but when I finish a painting, I don't like to really declare it finished until I kind of let it sit for a while, and then I take another look at it or have somebody else that's like a professional artist look at it. And because sometimes there's things you miss when you're just looking at it all the time. You have to get away and then come back and you go, oh, why did I do that? So anyway, this is, I did post this on Facebook earlier in the week. This is the one set of eyes I was doing. It's actually my grandson's eyes. And I like that kind of looking up to my big sister kind of thing. I love the different expressions that people make and what they say to you. So that's this. These are all about the same size. You can see it's on a board also. I have a little messiness on the back. I haven't labeled it or signed it. I really wasn't sure about signing it because I usually sign it down in the bottom right-hand corner. And because it's his face, it's like, what is that, a tattoo on his face? It looks kind of funny. So I haven't figured that one out yet. So anyway, here's his sister. She has very surprised eyes. I like expression. And I'm thinking maybe I need to add a little bit of more messy hairs coming down here, or a little hair here, because I'm so close up on her face, and she has a rather wide face. I have I'm small everywhere, small. I wear children's glasses. But she's, of course, the painting isn't life size, it's bigger than life size. But still, I like that surprised look in your eyes. So I like expression. So anyway, the source material we're using today for these eyes, this is a 2-scale picture of this lady. Now, one thing I found is my printer doesn't really print color exactly, and I'm not sure how to adjust it because I guess I'm not that technological, and it's a new printer and it does all these fancy things. So I got to figure that out. But in the meantime, I decided to just use my computer directly. I have it set up over here. I don't know if you can see it. There, I'm rotating here. See, well, it's got a light on it. I have a lot of lights. It's always good to paint with a lot of light. But believe it or not, on the screen is an image of this painting. And I can really see the small intonations and variations in color better, and it gives better color. She is actually very dark. Her skin is just beautiful. I just love the richness of the brown. And this is another picture I've taken of her that kind of shows her color better because it was so bright. We took the pictures of her in the late afternoon, and the sun was coming in at an angle. It was very bright. So I don't want to lose that rich color that her skin actually is. I don't want it, to be washed out or anything. So I'm going to try to maintain that by using several photos. If you're using photos of people or cats or dogs or anything like that, that recognition is important. It is particularly important to have more than one picture so that you can see things in one picture that you might not be able to see in another picture. So I did take more pictures of her. Here's another one, but I liked this one too. But you can see that it's pretty washed out right here, and I didn't think it showed as much. Now, one thing about the composition, this doesn't look like it really is thought a lot about composition, but this is the primary eye in the picture, and the composition, I went over this last week, but just briefly, if you put a third grid, like you see on a lot of photo processing programs, they'll have the third grid, and where the horizontal and verticals meet in the third grid is a very important point. There's 4 of them, and you just want to choose one, and that is a very good spot for your center of attention, for the most important thing. And this is the primary eye in this picture because it's a little bit closer to you and it's brighter. There's a lot of light coming over there. And that eye comes right in the third grid. And so that was an important part of this composition. So it's always, when you're setting up what you're going to do, it's important to be aware of these. You don't always have to follow it exactly. And there are more than one ways you can make a composition as far as using guidelines. This is just, it's an easy one that works well. But you have to also look at your picture because balance is important. You know, you don't have to have, symmetrical can be very boring, but you still need balance. I was an architect for 30 years and designing buildings. And, you know, I had a lot of practice with, I was just the way the building would look when you look at it. So it looks strong and it looks balanced and has a pleasing proportion. The Greeks and the Romans, they paid a whole lot of attention to that stuff. Sometimes we forget it these days, but it is really important because when you look at it, it's pleasing to the eye. And that's what you want. So today we're going to take this, which is just blocked out last week. I put color on, got the basic shapes in there, but now I'm going to go over it and I'm going to refine everything because it's a process of building up color and detail and all of the values and getting those right. So it takes a little time, but it's worth it if you want. If you like to paint realistically, which I actually really do. I like realism because people can relate to it. They can say, oh yeah, I understand this and I know, you know, it makes me feel such and so. And hopefully it'll make you feel good. And I love to paint people because I love people. And I love to paint portraits for people because it helps them think about the people they love the most. And they last a long time. They don't fade out. You know, I've got paintings that have been in the family for decades and if not more than a century. And like my great-grandmother, who I admire greatly, and she was an artist and she had a portrait painted. And that was like a really long time ago. But you know what? It still looks like new. So that's one of the important things about oil portraits. So I'm going to start out here. I've got my palette laid out with my earth tones starting from dark to light, moving on through the lighter, the yellows and the reds and the blues. And I just put one green because there's not a lot of green in this, but since green and red are complement, they make a neutral tone. When you mix together, they can be very good for shadows. So a lot of these, you know, like, why do I have two reds? Why do I have two blues? It's because one is a cool blue, one is a warm blue. And the same with reds. One is cool colors tend more toward the blues and like even gray, black has a warmer and a cooler. The warmer is more browner kind of almost. I mean, it doesn't look like it, but when you see it next to a cool gray looks like really steely, you know, like cold metal. But, and I use a cold gray, or ivory black is a very cold gray, and it's really good for certain things, like cool colors also push back. So rounding corners, if you put like on a face, the edge of the face where it disappears into the background, if you put a little gray there, it not only represents those tiny little hairs that are picking up the light on our face, but they also, it helps your face look like it's turning back and not like you're a paper doll cut out on a background. So that's one of the interesting things about the Zoom meetings. I don't know if any of you have noticed that, but you know, you can get a background and put it so it looks like you're on the beach or something like that. But the edges of the person are always like a cutout. It's kind of interesting. Anyway, so what I'm going to do first, I have my medium here, which is like it's the water for oil paints, but mine, I use a gel medium, so I can hold up my palette like that. You can see it's clear and doesn't run off, but it just gives, it makes the paints a little wetter for when you want them wet. But it's also good for when you start a painting out that you haven't worked on for like a week, I've been saving this for you. It can make some of the darker tones particularly turn kind of gray. They like matte. They get a matte finish to them. And I don't know how much it's going to be evident in here because I don't have any real blacks. All of them are kind of gray already. But when you put your fresh paint on, sometimes if you have dried paint, sometimes you get a different color. You like actually get a gray on a black until you kind of like let it down. And the medium wets it down. But you need to put it on real thin. Otherwise your painting gets slimy and it's like the paint almost slips off. You don't want that. But a real thin layer helps the adhesion. So I kind of just brush that on real thin. You can see when a painting dries, you can see where there's more medium because it's shinier, and then there's flatter areas, and that's one reason for varnishing paintings, which protects them from dirt and dust, and it brings out the color too. But that's something you do like 6 months after you paint it because it has to be totally dry. If you use thick paint, it takes longer. Thin paint, it takes a little short, but 6 months is a kind of rule of thumb for that. So first thing, I like to start my painting. And one thing you need to know is that when I do these recordings so I can see the comments, I need to do it like in selfie mode, and it actually makes everything mirror image. So this is actually the left-hand side, and it looks like it appears right-hand side to you. But the point is, if you are right-handed, then you want to start at the, this is just a recommendation that not everybody will agree with, but I want to start up in this area and go this way. And it's because sometimes, I mean, you can use a maul stick, which is like, most of them are longer than this. If you're painting small, a shorter one is like very convenient. They come really long. And you can stabilize your hand on this. But if you do like accidentally use your pinky finger or your knuckle to stabilize your hand, you're sticking your hand in wet paint if you did this area first. So if you work from this direction to this direction, you have less of a likelihood of sticking your hand in your paint and then putting it somewhere else and make little knuckle marks over your painting. So that's a recommended thing. Now, one of the things that I noticed looking carefully at my computer painting is, my computer image. You can see it on this photo. I can't see it on the paper drawing. If you look real carefully, there's hair up here. It shows the side of her face and the little hair. So I'm going to put that in up here. It's not there, but I can see it too on my computer screen because it's backlit. So I'm going to start with, let's see, which brush do I want to use? You know, I might just start with this big. It's always a good rule of thumb to start with a little bit larger brush than you really think you need because it'll make a smoother stroke. It holds more paint. And even with, you know, when you're doing small areas, sometimes it doesn't matter because it's got an edge to it. So I'm going to use this, and I'm going to put, it's real dark right here on her skin, really dark. It's like almost black, but you know, people, maybe there are really black people in Africa that have never had their skin diluted by white people, but because I've seen some, I don't think people come in actual black. So I'm going to use a burnt umber, which is a dark brown. Now to make it darker brown, I can put a little ultramarine blue, and that it makes it like virtual black. It's almost black. It looks black, but it makes the brown browner, and it's depending on how much blue in comparison to black. But one of the beauties of it is you get an almost black, and you can make it warmer or cooler because ultramarine blue is very cool, and the burnt umber is very brown and very warm, and so you can toggle back and forth and get it just where you want it. So I'm going to put it the edge of her face in here. So you can see it's very much darker. I'm looking at the shape on the computer screen, which is cropped the same way as my printout. I just trust it more. And then she'll have some hair up there. That might be a little bit more than we need. But then it turns into more of a skin tone. It's extremely dark in this corner. Like I said, this isn't black. Black would be like dead looking on her. But it's very, very dark brown. And constantly referring to my source picture to get the shapes right. And, you know, if I make a mistake, that's okay, because I'm going to keep looking at it and do those corrections. But I'm doing the best I can to not make a mistake. So some people get to painting and they, you know, if you want it to look realistic, you really do need to keep looking at your photos. So, see, this is very dark here too, going up onto her eyebrow. If you paint a lot of portraits, it's really a good idea to also, you know, get a good book on human anatomy and, you know, study it. You can look at yourself when you're brushing your teeth, look at the muscles in your arm and how they turn. And it just helps you gain that knowledge so that when you go and paint, you don't always see everything, but if you understand what's underneath that skin, all those muscles and bones, then you're more likely to be able to paint more accurately. Another thing I must say is that when you put on these initial layers of paint, you really want to keep the paint pretty thin, so you need more medium. And sometimes it will look a little hollow or liney just because of the medium sometimes does that. But it helps when you're getting that initial color, so when you make corrections, you're not having to deal with the thickness and texture of the paint below. You can just change the color. Okay, now, one of the things you can do is measure somewhat. Like here, this is not to scale, but it's easier. You all can't even see over here at my computer, but so I'm showing you. You can see here. And when you're trying to figure out where a line is like this, there's a really dark line going up here. And I'm trying to get it in the right place. But see, I can put the angle with my brush and go down here and see where that is relative to what I've got on there. And I know I want a darker streak going down here. You kind of have to memorize it or use another brush. And actually the darkness here is really some very dark values. Just mixing up a little more paint here. There's very dark values here. And there is that line I was talking about that goes down here. But you could, sometimes it helps get the angle better by just holding up your brush and then trying to move it down and see, well, maybe I didn't get that quite right. Needs to come down a little more here. And of course, it's larger and fuzzier here. And that's all of it. A lot of this is very dark on this side. And that comes down here. And then her nose. The advantage of having one, even if it's not as good a picture to scale, is that you can see the size of things better. And that can help you get relative positions. If you're saying, well, it's about 3/4 of an inch from there. So I've actually got 3 pictures of her here and the one with the skin tone. And so this has, the computer has more accurate detail and the light coming through and the texture of her skin. There's one photograph. It also has better color. I like the color much better on there. But this gives me, this one I showed you before where it has her skin very dark. And I don't want to lose that. I don't want to make her too white. And then I have the to scale one and then just the photographs. The more sources, it would be best if she was sitting here, you know, but it's, there's two problems with live models. One, it's boring for them to sit. It's hard for them to sit still. The other thing is it takes a long enough time to paint. So it's hard to get them to stay in the exact same position because it's hard for a human to hold that position. We want to wiggle, move. This dark actually comes down. I don't know if you can see I've got blue there. The sky is reflecting off her skin and it's not white. The light is so bright, it looks white, but it's got a lot of blue in it too. It's particularly true with the darker the skin. Normally the bluer the reflection of the sky on the skin. That's why you don't really see it very much on white people. Because I don't know why. That's just the way it works. Sometimes you just have to accept things. It's like, okay, trying to paint this, that's what it looks like. Okay. A nice thing about oil paints is you can mix in the paint with what's below when it's wet. That has advantages and disadvantages, but it can be very nice to be able to do that because then you can tweak the color more if it needs. Like I just put this in if I think it's too brown and doesn't have enough blue, and I can just reach down here on my palette and get a little blue, and darken the brown by adding some ultramarine. And sometimes right now it's a little too blue, but that's okay. Sometimes that exaggeration of the color can add interest. Painted a portrait of my son once, and I was just feeling kind of wacky, and I put an awful lot of very bright blue shadows all over the place on his skin. And then as I tweaked it and worked on it more, I kind of, subdued some of those, but still, it ended up being pretty cool. It looked really great to me. I mean, I like it. I still have it. He wanted me to paint it as a gift to his girlfriend, and me being the mother, I'm a real sucker. If he says, "Oh, Mama, could you paint this?" I go, "Okay." Anyway, because I love to paint anyway. Gives me purpose. But anyway, it was fun. And anyway, he broke up with his girlfriend, so I got to keep the painting because he doesn't want paintings of himself. So, see, one of the things we're going to have to do is make this. Right now, it looks like it goes in here with the way the shadow is, and there is a little bit of a shadow here, but it's going to need to go out. So that's one of the tweaks. And there's this has got red in it. But let me see. I'm just mixing some red in with the brown because I want a much redder brown. Because that part, it's the under part of your upper eyelid that it does have red in it. I can't see it very well, but I know it's there, and it's a little browner right along her eye. And it's almost black here. It's very dark. I'm skipping over here on this side to do this because faces are symmetrical enough that sometimes when you're painting and you've got one color on one eye, you want to be sure to have the same color on the other eye, depending on the light. And if I get a little messy, it's okay, because this is the underpainting, and it will get refined as I go along. But it's still, it's about the values, the darks and the lights. I'm trying to refine the locations of things and work more on, you know, where it's dark and where it's light, and the shapes. Like that goes up, and it's very dark here. A little more blue, because I added red to some of that. It's very dark right here. And her eyelid reflects that. Last time I was talking about how your eyeball, it's about the size of a ping pong ball. And that's what it looks like. It's like you have the skull cavity and somebody popped a ping pong ball in it. And then they covered it with lids. And the upper lid goes over the lower lid. So the lower lid goes like that and the upper lid goes like that. And it's a little at an angle. Her eyes are interesting, as you can see. People's eyes do slope down toward the center because that's where their tear duct is and that's the drain for the eye. But hers are more so than some, which I don't know if she has any Asian in her blood. She certainly doesn't have the folds, I forgot the something folds that the Asians do. But some people's eyes just go up more like that. Rubens, the famous painter way back in the Renaissance, Rubens, his wife and his daughter had eyes like that. I did a portrait. It was a copy of a portrait of his daughter once, and you could really see that. And when you saw his wife, you go, oh, that's where his daughter got the eyes from. So that was really interesting when I did that. She's a darling kid. And he painted her in a kind of really quickie painting. It's a very spontaneous, cute little painting. She was, she must have been about, she looks like she's about 8 years old. But then she died soon after, and after that he had 2 sons. I mean, he had had them before, but he did have 2 sons, and he painted a very large and elaborate portrait of his 2 sons. And I think it partly was motivated by the fact that something happened to him. He wanted a really nice portrait to remember them by. She died at 12 years old. Her name was Clara Serena. Sweet little girl. Rembrandt, one of his, I think the artist he admired the most. I read a biography about Rembrandt, and it has chapters on Rubens because he had such a huge influence on Rembrandt. There's a shadow that goes up. Oh, this is slightly darker. This darkness in here, it's a characteristic of people. I noticed that when I was painting both of the grandkids here. I don't know why you can see it. It's these shadows that go up here. I can see the same shadow on her. It comes up here and it comes up here. People are both they're all different, but they're all the same too. Okay, let's see. Where are we? There's a little bit of dark over here, and her hairline really dark, blacker, dark. She's beginning to get a little gray in her hair. Just adds that interest. Let's see, and that kind of goes off to the side. It's very dark here, very brown. A line here. So if I'm blocking with the canvas, you just sometimes have to have your arm at an angle that makes sense for the direction that you want your brush to go. Because you don't want to back up, you don't want to go this way with your brush, you want to go this way. And especially if you're dealing with the edge there. And I know I'm starting here and going here, but I still am jumping around because it's my nature, I guess, jumping around. Okay, now I'm using mostly bristle brushes at this stage. I don't know if that's going to be too small. I'm trying to refine these things a little bit. Paper towel is always good. I know I've got a little too much here, and because of the texture of the canvas, it's going to be a little hard. Right now, the canvas is very receptive to paint, and so it wants to hold on to it. I can still get some of that off. Just again, refining shapes. And some of these are kind of like fading into what else is there. There is a like a little wrinkle in here, and it goes along here too. It's very kind of red, and this comes around. Some of these are going to be in the final details. That's what I was doing in those other two eye paintings I just finished. Just kind of spreading the paint around, because what I don't want it to do is dry with sharp edges. I want it to dry with soft edges. Doesn't even matter whether they're exactly in the right space, but you can then go through and adjust them, but you don't want like these. It's hard to adjust sharp edges. And all of this darkness kind of goes. Okay. Now, things like eyebrows and especially eyelashes, you need to know where they are, but you can see I put in the eyebrows very lightly because I want to know where they are, but I want to get the skin in first and then lay the eyebrows on top. Her eyebrows are very light, you know, it kind of surprised her. She doesn't have any makeup on or anything. But, you know, what I want is people to look like people. And they don't need to look like magazine photographs. I don't want them to look photoshopped, but just like the pure them. So, and you can see when I painted these eyebrows very closely, you know, I've painted the actual eyebrow and eyelashes. When it's not so big, you don't really see this detail. So sometimes, you know, if you're doing a smaller head in a painting, you just want to hint at the eyelashes because you can see, I have eyelashes. And you see my eyebrows, partly because I put eyebrow pencil on them because they're actually very, very light. But my eyelashes, I've got them, but you can't see them with my glasses. There's a dark edge, but you really don't see eyelashes. So sometimes when people paint a head that's not very big and they put these big eyelashes on because they're pretty, but then they look kind of fake. So anyway, I'm going to paint some more, try to pick up some of these browns. Try to get the right brown. My computer adds red. And the light adds red, because even on the screen she looks pretty, you know, red-brown. So I need that, you know, that rich red color is beautiful. And, it's more of a burnt sienna, but I don't want to go overboard with it. But a lot of time on my initial block out, I make the colors more vivid, and then I tone them down. But what I don't want is things to be monotoned. You don't want all the skin to be the same. You want it to have variation, because people's skin has variation. Kind of mixing together a lot of my browns. This cheek is Really nice color. It's lighter in here, so I want to pay attention to that. It's darker here. See, this is a good example of how I can add this lighter, richer, redder brown. But because there's all this below, it mixes it right in, which is nice. I learned to paint in oils. My grandmother taught me when I was 10. But as I was a working mother and full-time architect and did volunteer work and taught children's Sunday school classes and painted. Well, there was a time that I just couldn't fit in painting, like 15 years. Kids were little. My kids are kind of spaced apart, so always had a little one running around for a while, and I thought I wouldn't have a little one running around anymore. I got a little one running around again, which is totally wonderful, even if unexpected. Nice surprise. But it did keep me busy. But that third child, I just couldn't wait. I couldn't wait to paint. I was going to wait till my kids got big to go back to painting. And it's just like, I can't. I'm ready. I got to paint. And so I learned in acrylics because they're not like oils. But I thought they'd be easier without, with children around, faster cleanup, dry faster. Thought it'd be easier to deal with. The problem is that I painted. I was in a show once, and I had some of my paintings in there, and people thought they were oils, and they were really surprised when they were acrylics because I liked the way oils blended and made. I'd learn in oils. And I was using acrylics as if they were oils, but it was much harder because they dry very fast, and you don't have the opportunity to, go back and blend some more and go back and blend some more. You have to mix the paint first and try to work it into these even tones, and it can be exhausting. And then I took a class with a live human model, and it was only taught in oils. So I pulled out my old oils because they last a long time. And these were ones that I bought maybe 15 years earlier, and they were still perfectly good. And I just fell in love. I was like, these are so wonderful because they can blend and they can make soft edges and you can do all this stuff. And it felt just so good on the brush. And I didn't go back to acrylics. Unless there was an emergency, like I had to paint. Once I was gonna, if you have to get something done super fast, which sometimes happens, then, I had to go back to acrylics to do that, but it was hard. I love oils. And usually, painting right there wet is fine. So there's times when you want to do certain things that it doesn't work so well, but I like to have multiple paintings going so that, if I want to paint some on one and then paint some on another and let the first one dry. What you really have to have it dry is if you're like glazing over with a wash. And you just want to, kind of like that initial block out with the medium. Sometimes you want to, like if I had all the skin done, and it was too red, and then I could just put a wash of, believe it or not, green on it, a very transparent green, and it'll tone down the red. Things like that. Then you need to do that on a dry canvas. Okay. I know this looks real funny now. Paintings typically go through what we call an ugly phase. always true if you're making corrections. Sometimes you have to just blot out a section that you messed up on and redo it. And then that's really ugly. So you just have to not let it bother you. Just, fix it. Never be afraid to fix things. Because if you know it's wrong, even if it took you a long time to do and it was really hard, if you know it's wrong, you're never going to be happy with it. And it is better to just go and fix it. Just blot it out, even if it took you weeks to get it just right, what you thought was right, and then you realize it wasn't right. It's like sewing. If you sew, if you make a really bad mistake in sewing, it's a good example. It's very hard to sew a sleeve on this part, and because you have to ease this seam and like bunch it up and sew it twice and put 1,000 pins in it. And horrible thing is when you realize that this fabric on the sleeve is inside out from this fabric, and then you have all this stuff that's really was so hard to do, and you finally got it right, and then you have to rip it all out, and usually sewed it twice so it would stay. So you have to, that's totally as bad as painting over something you struggle with. I think it's worse. This area is very dark. I want to get it the right color. It's lighter though than everything around it, but it's still pretty dark. And there is a tendency, is if something's surrounded by darkness and it's lighter, there's a real tendency to paint it lighter than it should be because it looks so much lighter in the picture. But if you took a little piece of paper with a hole in it and compared that to like over here when the whole thing is lighter, you'll probably find that even if this looks lighter compared to what is around it, this one, another place is lighter. And people do that with ears on a 3/4 space. If they, so there's dark hair in the ear, and the ear looks so light compared to the dark hair, but it's actually darker than other parts of the face that are more in the light, which makes sense when you think about it. But when you're looking at it and painting, it's easy to make the ear too light just because it's such a contrast that it jumps out at you. So that's like this area here. It's much lighter than this and this. Those are so dark, but it's still pretty dark. And that's true of this too. Kind of bring down those values. And I can see this shape isn't quite right because this lightness comes down more. What we have is kind of a negative shape here, and the negative space is where it's dark here, it's lighter here, and it's like this is almost a window with a window frame, and so you can get the window frame, but then you have to look at the glass in the window too. I don't know if I'm making any sense to you. But you look at the shape of the lighter part, and that can help inform the darker part, so to speak. And this is lighter, and then it goes here. Let's see. This is beginning to get, I've got it painted too light. There's no doubt about that, I know that. Then I can add the darkness, the darker values, and tweak them. I didn't have my computer screen at first, and like I said, the colors are better on the computer screen. It's almost a little bit of a hint up here of a little bit of a darker value. It's very dark here. I might have to darken those up later. when you put a lot of paint in and you keep mixing it, it can kind of gray out over time. And that's one reason why it's important to strengthen those, the very dark and the very light tones, especially if you've gone over them. Now that corner of her eye really disappears. It's gotta be there. Some of these pictures, you can see it a little tiny bit. It's very dark. So that's one of the advantages. If she was actually here, I could see some of these areas, you know, better, more realistically. In this whole area here. This is really almost gone in the shadow. Of course, her eye is very dark. And it's really hard to see. I tried to block in her pupils because you really can't see them in the picture. If she were here, you could. There's a lot of reflection in her eyes too. I had just kind of blocked them in. So they're kind of very thin. Don't want to lose that pupil. Things like the reflections in the eyes, one of those things like eyelashes, you have to add them later, and they really make the eyes look liquid. That's like you probably noticed on Bridgette's eyes. I mean, see, can you see that? How her eye looks very liquidy, and it's because of those reflections. So let's see. I think I'll get a little bit. I want that light to be really light on her eyelid. I want to just take a white, make this a little lighter here. See, there's another thing about, wet paint. I can go by with a paper towel and remove a little paint. I always put it back if I overdo it, but can't do that with acrylics, it's dry. And they have things that are retarders. They have accelerators for oil paint. Like liquid. Liquid is a medium that has a lot of accelerant in it, so that what that means is that it helps your paint dry faster. And different colors dry at different rates. The earth tones dry way faster than the whites and the reds, particularly dry pretty slow. Greens can. I see greens be awfully variable. But those earth tones, I mean, I painted all day before and had my earth tones on my palette drying out before, in the afternoon. I started painting like at 10 in the morning. They'd already be drying on my palette. Just obnoxious. It's like, what? Just blocking in a little darker area here. Some of this, it's like the skin is dark, but there's so much light on it. It's kind of dark and light at the same time. It's kind of poking at this, just trying to adjust the values. Which areas are just a little darker, which are a little lighter. And that's got a lot more, almost. Well, sienna. It's pretty dark. See, some of these areas are super light, where the sunshine is hitting. Like, in here, it looks almost white in the picture. And then she's got some creases in her forehead that's showing her expression. And one interesting thing about this lady is that this eyebrow, it kind of has a break in it, and there's a little like divot in her forehead. I don't know whether it's just an inherited characteristic or whether it could have been an injury at one time. You can see it very obviously in here. And these are the things that really make people individuals. See this? That's what I was calling a divot. It's one of the things that makes her look like her. So it's important. But if you find whatever it is, like not very attractive, you can play it down but still put it in. I was doing a portrait of a lady and her nose was cleft right here. And at some angles it was very obvious. And some angles you couldn't see it. Down so that it didn't look. I wanted to look like her again, but I didn't want it to be a strong feature. This is, I think, interesting. I like it. It just gives her character, and I like character. I don't like just people that look like everybody else. I call magazine people. Photoshopped people. It's one nice thing about the resolution between the camera and the computer is nice resolution. I can see, pores and everything. Rembrandt is amazing with pores because he can paint this really loose kind of looking painting. It looks like the paint was just slopped on there. And yet you can see every pore. It's like, did he paint every pore? I don't think so. I think that he was able to make you think you were seeing things that weren't actually painted. He was amazing, of course. You might not have heard of Rubens, but everybody's heard of Rembrandt, at least in the Western world. I once took some kids to the Ren Fair, the Renaissance Festival, that were half Swiss and half Algerian. And even their mother came with me. She was Swiss. They didn't know who Shakespeare was. I was like, what? How could you not know who Shakespeare was? But apparently in Switzerland and Algeria, they don't study Shakespeare. It's very British. It's Western European. And I just never thought about that. I thought everybody knew who Shakespeare was. It's not true. We have our culture. It's not like everybody else. Oops, I think it's poked her eye. Sorry. Let's see. It's usually, even if it's light on the inside, the edge of the eyelid, right next to the eye itself, it gets darker. I'm drawing a very thin line and I'm using a bigger brush. You can see it's not a tiny brush, but sometimes if you're holding too little brush, it's too easy to wiggle and move. But when you have the more bristles kind of gripping the canvas, it's actually easier to draw a straight line. And the other thing you always need to remember if you're trying to draw a straight line is think about drawing from your shoulder, from right up here. Because if you're going like moving your wrist is mobile in the wrong direction sometimes, and it's too mobile. But when you draw from your shoulder, you can get it, and keep your wrist still, you can get this one smooth line. I learned that being an architect. That was when architects drew by hand. That's just why I became an architect. I wanted to draw pictures all day. So I was lucky to be as old Lucky to be my age. I'm happy to be my age. So I can draw 30 years drawing by hand. What a delight. Get to draw pictures all day. Love it, love it, love it. I just love to draw. Love to paint. Never learned CAD, computer-aided design, for those of you who are not exposed to that part of the world, directing and design. It's interesting, my son was, one of my sons, I have more than one, he was explaining something to me and my husband, who is also an architect. And what he was explaining had nothing to do with building, but he explained everything in terms of buildings and contractors and things like that. It's like, we got it. We understand this. He's speaking our language. I'm just trying to get this in lightly. I need to add white. Sometimes adding white is a big mistake. That's why I'm kind of trying to get light without adding white, because it can make things look chalky or milky. And sometimes it can just ruin a beautiful color. You know, when you want it that clear, crisp, kind of like the sun shining through, like, you know, like raspberry jello in the sunshine. Can you imagine that? It's beautiful. But, you know, if you pour milk on it, it's sure going to change it. It's like tea or coffee, particularly tea, you know, that red tea color. If you put, it's so clear. I mean, it's dark, but it has this clarity. And when you add cream to it, it just gets like solid instead of like clear. What I'm doing is just looking and tweaking and adjusting, comparing. Because that's actually what painting faces is all about. And painting these eyes, I mean, there's a lot more to a face than eyes, for sure. And the mouth is one of the hardest things too. But it's really, there's no difference in the technique. It's all about the values. You know, what's dark, what's light, what's in shadow, what's in you know, in the brightness, in the light, and even in the eye. See, one thing I can see here. Let's grab a smaller brush for a minute. Eyeballs are not, the white part is not white. It's just like black people aren't black, white people aren't white, and even teeth and the white of your eyes are not white. They're this kind of light, sometimes a light gray, because the blue that, you know, you can see veins and stuff, so it's often blue because I mean, when they have red blood in them, but the blood is a bluer blood, just kind of like, you know, alizarin crimson being a cool red, a warm, no, that's a cool red, it has more blue. So your veins would have like a cooler red and so they tend to look more blue. Whereas arterial blood is really more like a cadmium red. And because it has all this oxygen, you can see here, See the difference? Can you see it? I don't know. This is the alizarin. That's more like your vein blood. And by the time you put your skin on it, it tends to look blue, or actually the gray can look very blue, but the arterial blood is much redder. That's probably a little, that's cadmium red light, and it's pretty light. It's probably more, I'm not a blood expert. I just know I have a lot of veins, and the veins are like kind of a bluer. My skin is see-through. Okay, enough of that. I don't want to do that. This is dark, 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 dark on my brush. I was going to put a shadow in the eye. That's what I was talking. And her eyes are, they actually, because of the sky, I think they have a little bit of blue, but it's like a Prussian blue. Prussian and phthalo blue are very, very, very similar. I happen to have a totally bright, an absolutely bright phthalo blue. I bought it at this store where the Utrecht. It's the brightest blue you ever saw. It's actually says green shade phthalo blue, and phthalo starts with a PH, but it's pronounced like a TH. And the whole word is actually really, really long. Should be on the back somewhere, because phthalo is kind of an abbreviation because it's a long word. But anyway, this Utrecht green shade phthalo blue is incredibly bright. And so the Prussian blue is a toned down version of basically the same color. And a lot of time, sometimes I want it super bright, but sometimes not. And so that's why I use a lot of the Prussian. Now some phthalo blues aren't, and most of them aren't as bright as that particular kind, but I just like to have it in case I want something super bright. Now I'm using a little phthalo and just a tiny bit of black to gray up the whites of her eyes, because I want to paint that shadow. It's a kind of little detail for now, but just kind of wanted you to see it. She's actually got a little more bluer and more darkness kind of right around this edge. That's pretty bright. Okay. I want to get this part of the white of her eye in, so that I can put the other on top of it. This, you can barely even see it. This one. I might have to tweak this color. Sometimes, because it looks a little blue to me now, but I know when I painted the kids' eyes, that's ones I keep showing you, because they're done, I painted them too white. I had to go back and make them bluer, and they look so much better. But what I want to do is show you this shadow area. The eyelashes cast a shadow. So there's a shadow, and it's going to be darker on her iris too, right up there. It's so dark anyway, it's hard to even see the darker part. This is a horrible brush. Let me see if I can get the bristles together. They're starting to splay out. It was a really good brush just a while back. Brushes can turn on you. I'm trying to get it to work anyway. Anyway, what I want to do is show you there's a very dark shadow here. It's almost a little warmer there. There's a little bit of red in the corner here. People have blood vessels in your eyes. I don't know if you noticed that on the kids' pictures I was showing you. I painted in all these little blood vessels, and I kind of muted them down and smeared them up a little bit. But she's got a lot of darkness right there in her eye. That's probably a lot of that's from her eyelashes, and part of it is, the light is coming from over here, and there's a lot of darkness here, so it really gets pretty dark even on the white of the eye, and the edge here is very dark. I probably need to put in Even more darkness here. Oh brush, I should get rid of that brush. It's aggravating me. What is the best brush? Could use really a little bit of a fatter, more blendy brush right here. I just did the bristles were starting to splay like that, and so when I was trying to get a good line, they were making streaky lines instead. But I'm trying to, almost all of this is invisible here. Very, very dark. And even here, it's very blue here. It's a soft, but this whole shadow comes down. Of course, this is the light side of the eye. But the shadows on the eyeball help define the shape of the eyeball. That it's round. And this is actually comes down more like that. I have to tweak it more later. Sometimes you don't want to do too much detail and too much intensity on one area because everything is relative, that surroundings will affect it. And that's one reason why I'm not too worried about it now, because once I get the surroundings in, it's not going to look the same. There's just a little darkness right in here. And even the edge of the eye, it's better if it's a little bit fuzzy. I'm just going over, this brush is fairly dry, but I want that edge to be soft. I want it to be a little fuzzy. Because when you look at eyes, it's the very edge. One thing is it's usually a blue or gray at the very edge, and it's not a sharp line at all. It's just a little indistinct. And sometimes even on the white of the eye, I notice on her, there's a little bit of a gray right in there. This is arced with the eyeball, but it's soft. It's a little fuzzy. That's what I mean by soft. It's a little fuzzy. That's even darker than it. Here, I just want to be sure. See, it's darker at the top again. Eyelashes. She'll always look a little funny before she gets eyelashes because, you know, people have eyelashes. So all that's real dark. But it's still darker right at her eyeball. Actually, I can tweak that later. I got a lot of things to do on this skin still. Sometimes you have I got too much paint on this brush, too much dark paint. I could just switch brushes, but the brushes, I like the size for what I'm doing because it has a nice, a narrow edge and a wide edge. And this area here, you can see it needs a lot of blending, and I can do that better with a large brush. The paint's kind of dry, and I could make it wetter, but I don't want it sloshy and slippery. That's a little darker in here. That's very dark in here. And then this darkness kind of spreads down here again. What I'm doing is borrowing some of the color already on there. Now this is narrower here. Can make a little adjustment here. This, I think, comes up a little closer to the eye. Needs to be a little lighter. Let's see. Not that light. Okay, I'll need, there's quite a lightness here. Nice lightness here. I have the light on my brush. It's very light here. A little more light in there. Ah, what is that? Little thing hanging off my brush. Get rid of that. I don't know what that was. Light is really bright here. And the texture of her skin goes kind of like this. I'll probably need to add some, almost looks like there's a teeny bit of blue there. Teeny, especially right there. This is all so bright here on her eyelid. And up here. I want that shape right. I think that it needs to come up a little bit more. And then round it a little more. Yeah, it's good. And then the side rim comes in there. And that's right there. I want to trim this down. That is also bright. And then that all floods down into this area here that's so bright. I get that up there, then it comes down, almost disappears there. Okay. All of this is same. I'm going to get more white. Oh, I'll be tweaking this probably some, but I want to not lose that white of the light, because that's the light is so important here. There's a lot of light over here in the corner of her eye too. It's like there's dark and there's light, and that's you know, the contrast between dark and light are so critical to a successful painting. It's nothing more that's boring. It's just, you know, if you have your whole painting, it's a bunch of midtones. Nice light that comes down. Swooping down here, this is almost blue light. I'm going to add just a tiny bit of blue in my skin tone. And it comes down, sweeping down below that big shadow, down here, and over here, picking up the sky. And this red thing that down here it's more minimal. See, I can go over that very easily, but it still is it's an influence. And then you have some darker coming there. This is all very, I'm just gonna blend it in here because it's there and not there. I know this is blue, but I don't want to lose that. And sometimes a little exaggeration with a color can be really good for the impact of the painting. From my experience, it usually disappears more than I had actually planned, but it's pretty cool. Oh, this is pretty darn white. I'm not using a whole lot of medium because I don't want it all slimy. Now this is going to be adjusted more because it's, like I said, it's not white. But sometimes you have to put in the white to take it away. Sounds kind of strange, but part of it is just, it's always easy to blend things out. But it's too easy to overblend them out. And it's all these different intensities. This is a very white part. There's so much light right here on this cheek. It's probably the brightest part. And the eyes coming down. And then you have some, this isn't quite as bright here. It's not much on the ear. It's a little bit over it. So a lot of time this part of the ear is very, very light, but not here. And it's very light at the edge of her face. But the light comes down, and here above this dark area is a lot of light. So that's about right there. And up here, and it spreads. Whoa, that's a little too much paint right there. You can see I'm kind of painting with the flat of the brush. I'm being very careful because I'm trying to get the shapes right. I don't want this to smear all over where it's dark. Like that. And then it's really light up here above her eyebrow. People are lighter above their eyebrows. There's a ridge in your skull there, that's why. There's a lot of light right there. Like I said, I'm just exaggerating the light because I don't want to lose the light. Oh, this is so light. My goodness, the time is just moving by. Gives you time. If you're painting along, you can always go back later, and watch these videos and come with your paint all set up and paint along. I see Brian Dodd is watching. Hi, Brian. How are you? Did you ride your motorcycle here? Had to have been hot. Let me see what everybody else is, because my rubber band that's holding my phone. Lena's watching. Hi, Lena. And Richard Daigle. Yay. How you guys doing? They're waving at me. Hi. I have a big old rubber band. I've got a little thing rubber banded to my tripod that is one of these little things. I used to put my little squirrel paintings in it at the mill. And, it's a little prop, It's great for holding a cell phone, but you have this big old rubber band going by, so it's kind of like blocking Lena. It's blocking Lena. Sorry, Lena. Okay, back to this. I'm just adding this light. I'm talking about light, tracking light. Even though I started out, with the dark and the light, these are all little value changes, little value, where the values, it's not quite as strong there. But they really help me later on, just seeing where I'm at. This is all kind of light, but not that light. Get some a little bit more color in here. I need more. Let's see what color I have here. This is more of that. I need more raw sienna. That's pretty raw sienna. Okay. See, once you get the darks and the lights, then you can kind of blend them together. And that's one reason it's not bothering me that my contrast is too great. Because like I said, if you get dark and a light, you just keep going over it, it'll just gray out to nothing. And so it's more of a problem is if you end up graying it out to nothing, because that's not what you want. You want those lights, but they don't stay that bright. See, even here, I'm trying to keep that there, right there. I need more light. So a lot of painting is these constant little adjustments. It's like a little more here, a little more there, a little less here. Oops, I missed that, that kind of thing. I need some more red there. One thing that you get when you turn, when you're values turned from dark, like a really dark, to a really light. There's this area right between, pretty sure it's called the penumbra, where the color is more intense. And so, for instance, on her nose, it's somewhere right in here. And this isn't a straight line. It's like really close to a straight line, but it's not quite. So it would be good to make it a little soft and edge. Which I'm going to get a soft brush. I want a really nice soft one. This is a great one. The sables, a lot of sables are used more for black color than a lot of people use them for oils. I don't use them a whole lot, partly because they're expensive, but they make a very solid line, and sometimes you don't want that solid line. They're very soft, and so they can kind of feel like they're collapsing on you. They don't stand up. Bristle brushes really stand up. They're stiff. And some of them are stiffer than others. I'm trying to get this nuance of this turn right there on the ridge of her nose. There's just so much light, and then it goes to dark. And I want to get that, adding some like red in there in the transition. Red is always good with skin. We all have blood. Blood is good. Only blood. I need some blood. Okay. The soft brushes are really good for blending because they don't grab up a lot of paint. They kind of just smooth it over and can squish it back and forth. So like right here, see how it just kind of adds this very soft edge. This is a soft brush with no paint on it, no medium on it, because I don't want to add paint. I just want to blend the paint. Some artists don't blend anything, which it could look really cool. I like to blend paint. But not always. Nothing's true all the time. Everything's true some of the time. But anyway, I don't want to do it. It's a little early for a lot of blending too. Sometimes you just need to do some. Basically, a lot of painting is like what you have this urge to do. I've so many times sat down with my painting and said, I'm going to start here. But before I start there, I got to fix this one thing. And then I spend the next 2 hours fixing that one thing and developing that area instead of doing what I wanted to do in the first place because I just kind of needed to do that. It's like, oh, I got to do it. Okay, now I need to do something about this white line. There is a very light line there that she's got. Comes up to a point. Not much. Not close. Sometimes I use a ton of brushes. Today I'm using pretty much this same brush because it's really working for me. It's just kind of the right size and shape for what I'm doing. I might have some others like that, but sometimes you're just working with a brush and it's just like, this is a great brush for what I'm doing. Brushes make a huge difference. You gotta have good brushes. Otherwise, you really can't control your paint. It's just one reason I have so many brushes. Because they do wear out. But sometimes you want an old worn brush. You've heard me say for fur. I use old brushes for fur. For dogs, cats, squirrels, chipmunks. All kinds of little furry things. But you can probably see my brushes. Can you see my brushes? I have these brushes. These are my bristle brushes. These are my little brushes with some big brushes mixed in because they're real soft blender brushes. And then I have some really big brushes, which I use sometimes. Oh, isn't that a heavy thing? Those are my big brushes, because sometimes you need a big brush. So you can see, got some brushes. Okay, where are we? Let's see. I need to blend out this area more. And I don't want it, I want a lot of siennas in there because it's very sienna-ish. It's more kind of lighter brown. This really dark or black right there, but I want to keep this going here. There's a line there. And then you have dark and light coming in. And this is more blended. Let me get some of this blending done. I'm gonna have to go and put some black in here, but it's really, there's this light, and then there's this adjacent, really black. It's almost black. It's actually kind of almost bluish, but I'm gonna have to work on that light shape there. And then this cheek is coming down. It's fairly light there. And red. It's a little. Get the right color here. Is that right? Okay. Try and get it a little lighter here. And this area, this thing goes in here. And then this is actually a thinner area of dark. It's really dark, but it's not that wide. Well, that's a little lighter. And then this all kind of comes down into this area. Okay, so we have this. There's a funny little hair there on the brush. Okay. There's the light. And it kind of leaks down here somewhat. Kind of leaks in there. So you can barely see it. It has more of a lighter skin tone than the brightness. And I have to get another brush here, a little bit smaller with some of that bluish, blackish, grayish, brownish. See, when you have a color that's bluish, blackish, grayish, brownish, you just put a little blue, black, and gray and brown together and mix it all up. Hopefully, you'll hit it. But it is nice to have that, the brown underneath to blend into, because it's quite dark and then it gets quite light in a big hurry. See, this is quite dark here. And then this kind of spreads out. It's really dark over here. I think this light needs to extend a little bit more. No, that's really light. Okay. You can use some more light here. Some more light up here too. There's some really bright light up here. It's actually a little bluer. I have to add some blue. This actually extends mostly up here. It's the skin itself and the face particularly. It's just a play of light and dark, and it's just so interesting. Need a little more pink there. And it comes down. You can see I could spend a long time just on this area trying to get it right. And I don't want to overspend time. Like I said, you know, you don't want to get too focused on just one area without keeping up the rest of the paintings, because everything relates to everything. And a change, just a little bit of a change, can just have its influence. It can be influenced by all the other stuff. And you might end up missing. But I need to back up and take a look at this. It's always a good idea to do that. See, this is, it's lighter definitely, but I got it too light. And I can tell it when I back up because it just jumps out at me. I just want to, I want to keep the shape. I want to tone down the value. And her nose sticks out. There's a little bit closer. This is actually a little closer to this nose coming down. That's a pretty narrow spot right in there. Oh. I think this comes down a little more here. And there's a mid-tone coming down in between, right in there. It's really dark in here. Let's see. This area here is such an interesting area. This is a little darker here. The more you look at it, the longer you look at it, the more you see. That's why it takes some time, because you keep seeing other things you didn't see before. This is not quite right. Partly this is very dark, and this kind of disappears more into there. Made the same mistake on my other paintings. It was like too much there. Which is where experience comes in. You find yourself doing the same mistake, and then you say, okay, enough of that. I don't want to do that anymore. It's not working for me. And this whole area here being so dark. And I want to put a little gray hair in there. I don't know whether I want to do it now. Put a hint of it. It's just real subtle, but it kind of is a halo-like. It's very dark. Wow, that's soft. I got it, I think, too curvy. But I want it soft, so I want to go back and get this brush that I was using, as long as it doesn't have much paint on it, because I just want this to be not an obvious thing. It isn't obvious. I didn't see it at first, but it'll give her head shape. So there's a little It's way too dark. Okay, put that person. There's a little bit of darkness coming around here. This edge of the hairline can be a tricky area because of the hairs, the way they start, but they, there's a little hair there. It's like you can see, there's no line there. There's a line here where it's pulled back and I get longer here. But here, it's like there's a shadow up here. The hair is actually here, but you can see my skin through it. All of that is, it's not a line, and it's hard to get that kind of phased in hair right there. But it does give form to the face. But I'm going to go back and work on that more later. Like I said, I'm trying to work from one side to the other. And this is probably too prominent. It's really pretty dark right in there. This is how I can take 4 weeks to do a portrait. But honestly, I'm just working on it for like 2 hours. And then 2 hours, 2 hours, which really, a lot of people take a lot longer than that to do this. Most of the paintings I've done and these demos have been, I've got them virtually done, but usually I go through afterwards and after the demo's over and just do some touch-ups when I can really focus. Because I'm talking and teaching and painting and, it's not 100% concentration. It's a little distracting. This is really dark in here. Get that right. That's it. Oh, that really blended. I don't want to use this blender too much because it's more of a finishing thing, but sometimes it just helps me to spread the paint a little bit better. I want a little more sienna there. Right in here. So I want a soft transition there. It's always a good thing to practice painting folds in fabric. The folds in the face are like the folds in a fabric, really, because wrinkles do this a lot. They're not uniform top to bottom. The light's coming from above. So where the skin goes and curves around and goes down, there's a really soft edge there, but then usually it's the other side, usually wrinkles, whether they're wrinkles in fabric, folds in fabric, wrinkles in a face, have a soft edge and a hard edge. They don't always do that, but if they have both soft edges, they're more like this. And you have to figure where the light is, because if the light's coming down here, even if it's going like this, it's going to cut off at some point and cast a much sharper edge on one side, and then as it comes out of the deep part into the light, you have a lot softer edge, if that makes any sense. So there's a hard edge and a soft edge, usually, depending on where the light is and how deep the trough is between the high points and the low points. And there is a tendency in painting wrinkles on people to over-exaggerate it because you're concentrating so much on trying to get it right that has a tendency to exaggerate. And that's true not just with wrinkles, but with anything. Once there was I was in it was a group that painted live nude models. And there was I think it was a councilman or something from the city government that, or the county probably, because this was in Maryland where they don't have cities hardly at all. But he came into this class, and he really wasn't an artist, but I guess he was just checking out the Center for the Arts, or maybe he just wanted to paint nudes, I don't know. But he was not an experienced artist. He was painting this lady, and he made her breasts huge, and he didn't even know he was doing it, but it was because he wasn't used to seeing them, you know, on somebody like that's sitting in a chair on the other side of the room, you know? And so that's all his eyes could see, because they were just unusual to him. And it was so funny. Everybody was like chuckling under their breath because he couldn't see it. He couldn't see it at all. He just painted what was different. And I think that's what was distracting him, I guess. That's really funny. He never came back. But what we see is partly a product of what our eyeballs take in, and partly a product of our minds. Our minds really affect what we see, more than you'd ever think. I've learned so much about how the brain works through painting. The brain definitely, takes in the information from the eyes and then translates it in ways that are sometimes surprising. That's why we see 3D. Our brain takes 2 images and it translates it. We don't even know what's happening. We just look and it's 3D with 2 eyes. The brain is amazing. This is where her eyebrow is going to be. And I'm going to have to work on her a little more, because there's a light area up here. And I just kind of blended this light area out. See how it disappears? This blend, it's gone. Yeah, put it back in. My screen timed out. Go on, come back. Come to me. Huh. It's gone. Well, it's getting late, so I'm going to work without the screen, because we're going to have to wrap it up real soon. And I'm going to have to steer. This is the point at which I, before the next session of painting, I need to sit down and just steer what I've done, and make a list of things I need to work on. Because obviously there's still a lot to work on. But you really need to step back, give a little time and step back and look at it from farther away. And you guys are looking at this all the time from farther away, and you're probably saying, why doesn't she do that there? That's a mistake over there. But, you can only do one little spot at a time. Sometimes you set up to do something and then you don't quite get to it. But I don't like anything like super glaringly awful when I finish for the evening. Just kind of blending down some of this stuff so that it's easier to make the corrections. There's a really bright spot over here. And then some of this has a blue cast, really. Just underneath this dark, all of this is super blue-gray. So, that's not fair yet. I'm just blending some of this out. Paper towels are wonderful. Yeah, that's all blue, black, gray, and then there have a bright white. And there's a little skin tone. Comes down between this area. Just about done for the evening. Yuck. That's my favorite word of the day, I guess, is yuck. There's a point at which when it's getting close to stop, when you look at your palette, you go, oh my gosh, I haven't even used that color yet. Now I gotta clean it up. Or I better use it up fast. So I gotta clean up. Hope I'm not blocking the way. I just need that angle. There is really a lot of this sienna in here. Really like to get some of that in. Yeah, like that. Now this is a very spotty area. And there's a lot of texture, skin texture in here. Which, so I'm not going to want to blend all that out, but you know, some of this just needs to be put in later. Little dabby dabs. The dab, that can be a very good motion for painting. You know, it's da 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 da, kind of tap tap tap, kind of little tiny strokes. I don't have my good color picture yet. Just really need to add, I think, some, it bugs me that I don't have that blue gray in there, but I'm almost out of time. Maybe I can get something really fast. I got another brush. I always say the worst thing about art classes, for me, because I love to paint, is that you have to stop and clean up. Now I could go on painting, but I'm trying to really paint along, you know, let you see the process here. So I don't want to go off and finish it up during the week and say, oh my, I don't have anything to do because I finished it by accident. I'm sorry. Don't want to do that. Okay, I really wanted to add a little blue black. And I think to choose my blue, get a little in there. I want it light. No, but it has white too. Is this going to work? I'll probably ruin it, but that's all right, I'm not done. It's always a mistake to do what I'm just about to do, so don't ever do It's like right before you have to clean up, you go, one last thing. And that's kind of a death knell because it usually doesn't come out well for you because then you just have to fix what you just messed up. But I really wanted to get this blue in here. This adds all kinds of flavor. It's a lot of blue. Beautiful. Blue. Well, where's that brush? There it is. I think I'm going to have to stop. No. You'll have to stop. No. Stop, Roxy. Stop painting. Now. Okay. Can tell I have a problem with that. Anyway, it's just like 9. I think it's 9. My clock on the wall says it's 9. So I'm going to sign off for tonight. This was 2 of 4. So next week we will sit here and bring up the level. You can see we made some progress. And so we will just continue finding those areas that need to be tweaked and adjusted and bring out the detail. And then the following week we'll do the eyelashes and those little finishing things, the shine in the eyes. So thank you for watching. Bye.